One of the things I like to do here on my channel is highlight articles, stories that may otherwise be ignored by mainstream media. And this is a really interesting article I saw yesterday by my guest today, Gawain Towler. Gawain, how are you?
Very well indeed. Good morning and all.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about this article that you wrote for The Critic entitled, and I'll put it up there so people can see it. How EU propaganda is targeting the youth of the UK. It is clear that the EU is still thinking of its 1,000 different ways to win and is doing so by bombarding the younger generations with pro-EU messages. Gawain, can you give some background to this story, please?
Well, for many years, around the concept of Europe Day, the European Union has known full well the great old Jesuit doctrine of catch 'em young. If you give me someone until they're 7, you have the man. And they have understood that with current education and this sort of the dulling of the European mind in schools, that propaganda targeted at the youth has a great deal of impact. And as they point out in the memo that you mentioned, 71% of the under 25s voted to stay in the European Union. There was, again, the old dictum that if you're not a socialist at 21, you have no heart. And if you're still one at 31, you have no brain. Well, I would say that belief in the European Union, because it's fuddly and cuddly and fuzzy and warm and nice and stops wars and everybody loves each other and it cares about animals and it cares about so much, is ideally pitched and suited to the youth market. And they see that. But it is clear that they have not given up their ambition of keeping or bringing the UK back into the EU. And there are many fellow travelers in the UK that are still like that Japanese soldier on Guam fighting that war. The problem is that if they continue to have the ability to pump propaganda into our schools, then the natural organic course of our independence, leading to a greater focus on what is our own history and our own culture and our own democratic system, can and will be subverted by the spend of millions of pounds a year in propagandizing the youth. Now, this has been going on for years. I mean, they produce comic books. I have a whole bunch of them. They're classically funny. There was one brilliant one called the Raspberry Ice Cream War, where ice cream makers from across Europe realized that they couldn't compete with each other. They must best make a raspberry ripple all together. And I suspect it would taste like that worst chemical walls concoction you find in the bottom of the freezer when it's defrosted and refrosted 15 times over 10 years. That is the sort of ice cream that they would create. But in this is not just the European Union. Each of the European Union institutions has its own propaganda spend. And this was a document produced by the European Parliament, that by their bureau, which is the governing body of the Parliament. This document pointed out that 3 major projects that they have, most of which impact on youth, but not just youth, have rules governing them. And those rules say that they can spend the money in EU countries. Okay, well, they are EU countries. And in accession states. Well, obviously, the UK, since the beginning of this year, is neither an EU country, nor is it a country that wishes to join the EU, or at least not according to every democratic vote in the last 10 years. So they are changing their rules. And they are saying that the UK should now be a new version, and they're allowing themselves to continue to spend up to 30 million euros, which, if broken down, would be a few million quid here, on targeting schools. The projects are Euroscholar and the European Schools Ambassador Programme. Euroscholar invites schools to compete, and the European Parliament office in London then chooses which has been the most fanatically loyal to the project, and children from that school are normally invited to either Brussels or Strasbourg to have a mock-up plenary parliamentary session with children from all over Europe to say how wonderful they all are and how terribly European they all That is now all being done on Zoom. So these projects are still going on, but obviously, as we are, not in the pub together as we might normally be in the past, but in fact sitting in our own rooms feeling sorry for ourselves.
So, Graham, I would think, most people would assume that post-Brexit, the idea that there's EU propaganda in British schools would be a complete non-starter. Are you saying there's a serious possibility that this may now continue?
It's not a possibility, it's a certainty. Over the years, over the 40 years of our membership of the European Union, these contacts have been built, and it's not just at schools, it's universities. Yes, the Erasmus program has been overturned and been replaced by the Turing program, but don't think that the Monet professorships have stopped. Don't think that these contacts with little European movement wannabes in schools up and down the country have stopped. It's up to the teachers. All it requires is a teacher to write to the European Parliament, say, can we be involved? And they're in. And they get funded in the European Schools Ambassador Program. It's delightful. They're busy little beavers, get to build a European info point to tell their friends exactly how wonderful the European Union is and what wonderful things it's doing for them, like not giving it vaccines. But the winner of that, again, gets invited to the Parliament event, and they get awards and plaques, and they become senior ambassadors, and the school gets a nice little plaque to say how wonderful the European Union is and how they are committed to the European Union. The other thing is the opinion multiplier groups, which glories under the acronym, oh my God, OMG. The OMGs include the journalist program, which you will remember from your time as European parliamentarian, where the European Parliament recognizes that it is so dull that no journalist worth their salt would ever travel to Brussels to visit it. So they fund it. So local journalists from across the EU, in the UK in our case, can talk to their editor and say, hey, matey, if I go to Brussels and cover the European Parliament from our local area's interests, you don't have to pay me a bean. It's all funded by the European Parliament, and you get stories and you don't have to pay me. Why not? Now, very few editors would ever turn down that, and very few journalists I know would ever turn down a nice junket. So this project is still ongoing, by the way. The journalist program is still going for British journalists. I didn't mention that in the article, but it's there.
So would you like to see the British government do something? Would you like to see them respond to this in some way?
Oh, I certainly think that the Education Secretary, when he's not trying to work out if schools should ever reopen, should consider whether, when they're open, he should be asked the question, are you happy that what is now a competitor and is behaving appallingly in the light of restrictions to the UK, the damage it's doing to try and truckers not being able to take ham sandwiches when they get to the Hook of Holland, the whole business about trying to block PEP in March last year when they were diverting medical equipment for the UK that was ordered and paid for back to France in boats in the Channel. They were blocking them. The customs officials were doing this. The behavior of the EU since has not just been a competitor, but a aggressive competitor. Now, would we be happy if millions of dollars of American money was spent? Would we be happy, particularly under Trump, promoting America in British schools? Would we be happy if the Chinese did that? Absolutely not. So why are we continuing to allow what is a competitive and at times hostilely competitive foreign power from influencing our children? There can be no justification for it, just so a couple of teachers can have a boondoggle to Brussels.
Finally, going to someone who would say to you, look, this is, you're overreacting. This isn't important. We shouldn't worry about it. It's all great. What would your response to that be?
Education is always important. The idea that it is unimportant is absurd. Teach the history, teach society, teach constitution, teach what happened, fine. And yes, invite the European non-ambassador to your school's open day to give a speech about it. Fine. That's all very much above board. funding programs to tell our children that the EU is a better way to live than our own country, that's a concern.
Gwaine, it's a story I think we're going to have to keep an eye on. As I said, people should check the article out over at The Critic. I'll put a link down below. Gwaine Taylor, I'm sure we'll speak again soon. Thanks for your time. Cheers, Gwaine.
Thank you very much indeed. Have fun. Bye.